Back to the budget, our regular Monday panel, former Howard Government Minister Peter McGauran and Hawker Britton MD, long-time Labor advisor Simon Banks. Gentlemen, great to see you. Peter, this is a bit of a shift in terms of thinking. The Treasury more optimistic about inflation than the RBA is ahead of Jim Chalmers' third budget tomorrow.
Very risky of the Treasurer to pin the government's political fortunes to such an assertion that interest rates, inflation will be between 2% and 3% by the end of the year. Unless the American inflation rate comes down, Kieran, it's not going to happen. And he's putting everything at stake by making such a prediction. He's setting a marker in the ground that can be used to measure his and the government's performance against.
A lot at stake, as I mentioned to Katie Gallagher earlier in this program, Simon, when it comes to people's personal budgets, but for the government's political prospects as well. Peter's right.
Oh no, I think the Treasurer's put a clear line in the sand. I think people will be able to judge the performance of the government over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, whether it actually achieves that target. And the important thing, Kieran, of course, is the RBA forecasts were made in advance of this budget. They didn't take into account the measures that are about to be announced tomorrow night. What we do know, though, is a number of the measures which the government announced last year, which it looks like it's either going to extend in some shape or other, particularly electricity rebates and further rental assistance. We know that they had a material impact on bringing down inflation during the course of the last 12 months. And really all the government's doing is projecting that that's going to happen again into the future. So I think the really interesting debate come actually Thursday night. Is Peter Dutton going to vote for this electricity and rental relief for low and middle income Australians?
Yeah. So when we make that comparison, Simon, before I go back to Peter, let's just drill into that a bit, because the RBA is saying that inflation will be, its forecast is inflation at 3.8% at the end of this year. Treasury saying it's going to be below 3%. Now, the last budget, those measures that you referred to took off 0.5% of CPI. So that gets you from 3.8 to 3.3. There's still a discrepancy there between the Treasury and the RBA.
Yeah, and the truth is, though, that we don't know the full set of measures that are going to be announced in the budget tomorrow night, Kieran. So clearly the government won't just be relying upon those two measures, but we saw last year they had an absolutely demonstrable effect in terms of reducing the level of inflation in the economy. The RBA, no criticism of them. They don't know the details of those policy announcements, and so their forecasts simply can't take those matters into account. But Jim Chalmers has made it very clear. He has been talking with the Reserve Bank governor. He's obviously been flagging that there might be something in this space. We'll know the detail tomorrow night, and then I think it'll be interesting to see how the RBA adjusts its forecasts accordingly.
Peter, even if inflation does rise, and whether it be the US or other impacts driving that, can Jim Chalmers say, look at those Treasury numbers when I delivered the budget, it wasn't me that did this. I put downward pressure on inflation.
Yep, fair enough, Kieran, and that will be his last line of defence. But I've never seen anything like this budget before. It's full of political risks. If I was a backbencher in a marginal seat, I would wonder why the Treasurer had to raise the high jump bar so high. There was no need to predict that inflation will be 2 to 3% at the end of the year. You've got a budget. He's a salesman, so it's an expansionary budget, but it's a contracting budget. It's fiscally responsible, but we're looking after cost of living pain for the electorate. There's just too much that he's promising. He's such a salesman. I think he's believing his own propaganda now. He cannot deliver everything that he's promised us in the lead up to this budget. He might on budget night and for a few weeks, if not months afterwards, but long term, this is not a budget that reduces inflation, and it doesn't, as sure as anything else, improve the economic foundations of the economy, such as productivity.
How does it set up the political battle over coming weeks, but it's really coming days as well when you look at the budget reply, an important moment for Peter Dutton on Thursday, Simon?
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, he's going to have to make some really key choices on Thursday night. If you believe the rhetoric that comes out of Angus Taylor, for example, they're going to have to cut spending. Well, where are they going to cut it from? Who are they going to take money out of the pocket of? If they're not going to support these measures, they're actually voting for increased inflation in the economy. So some big choices coming up for Peter Dutton on Thursday night, and the biggest problem at the moment is no one knows what he stands for.
Peter McGauran, it is an important time in the electoral cycle, isn't it, to start fleshing out a few more bits of vision for an opposition leader?
Yes, to a point, but we all know Anthony Albanese came to government either parroting the then government or not offering any alternative. Look, I'm prepared to cede the week to Jim Chalmers and the government. It's a very skillfully and artfully presented budget, and there's been a lot of preparation in the media leading up to it. But long term, I don't think it solves their problems, and he's fired all his best shots. What happens if inflation's still high in August, September? Where's his cost of living relief then? So, frankly, I think the Emperor's got no clothes.